Honestly, what is all that noise? You'd think with the tuition these kids pay, the university could keep the local militia from playing war games outside the library. Some of you can barely focus on a good day. The proctor's voice, belonging to a Mr. Davies, was thick with sarcasm. A cheap performance for the dozen students hunched over their final exams. The crowd offered a few nervous titters. His gaze landed on the girl in the third row. The one in the faded grey hoodie who hadn't flinched, hadn't looked up, hadn't so much as paused the steady rhythmic movement of her pen across the paper. She was the picture of unbothered calm, which he misinterpreted as profound indifference. But when the muffled thumps from outside turned into the sharp crack of shattering glass and the building's fire alarm began to shriek, a man watching on a grainy security feed thousands of miles away leaned closer. He wasn't watching the windows. He was watching her hands. If you believe true strength is proven, not proclaimed, type quiet professional in the comments below. The world outside the ivy-covered walls of the lecture hall had been a distant academic problem for the students of Political Science 305. But now it was inside. The distant rhythmic whump 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 of helicopter blades grew from a background nuisance to an oppressive window-rattling roar. Mr. Davies, whose smug confidence had evaporated, moved nervously toward the windows, peering out with a frown. The students whispered, their concentration broken, their anxiety a palpable hum in the room. All except her. Anya Petrova didn't look up. Her focus was absolute, a bubble of pure intellectual discipline amidst the rising tide of chaos. She was on question 4, an essay on asymmetric warfare, and her pen continued its silent, deliberate dance. To Davies, it was the ultimate act of millennial detachment, a blatant disrespect for the gravity of the moment. He saw a child lost in her own world, oblivious. What he failed to see was the subtle shift in her posture. Her shoulders, previously relaxed, were now perfectly squared. Her breathing, already steady, deepened into a controlled diaphragmatic cadence he might have recognized had he ever spent a day in a profession where panic was a death sentence. The noise wasn't a distraction to her. It was data, and she was processing it with a terrifying efficiency that no final exam could ever measure. The first explosion was a percussive blast of sound and air that rattled the teeth. Then the windows on the far side of the lecture hall didn't just break. They disintegrated inward, showering the room with a crystalline spray of tempered glass. Dark, heavily armored figures descended through the empty frames on thick ropes, their movements impossibly fast and fluid. Smoke canisters hissed, flooding the floor with a thick, disorienting fog. Shouts of "get down on the floor" now echoed in the cavernous room, barked with an authority that commanded instant obedience. The students screamed a chorus of pure terror as they dove under desks, their meticulously constructed worlds of theory and debate collapsing into the primal reality of fear. Mr. Davies yelped and scrambled behind his podium, his face a mask of chalky white shock. But as chaos erupted, Anya moved. She didn't scream. She didn't panic. In one smooth, economical motion, she flowed from her chair not to the floor, but into a low, perfectly balanced observation crouch. Her eyes, narrowed and analytical, were not on the operators, but on their fields of fire. Their entry patterns, the geometry of the room. It was the posture of a predator, not of prey. One of the operators, finding an injury as part of the drill, went down hard, his M4 carbine clattering across the polished linoleum floor. It spun to a stop near the feet of another instructor, a man playing the role of a non-compliant hostile. This was the test within the test. A moment designed to challenge the team's response to an unexpected complication. The hostile actor bent down, his hand reaching for the weapon. It was a fraction of a second, but for Anna, it was an eternity. Before the lead operator could even shout a command, she exploded from her crouch. It wasn't a sprint. It was a launch. 3 precise steps. She didn't grab the weapon. She intercepted it. Her left hand cupping the magazine well, while her right hand swept under the pistol grip in a single seamless motion that blurred with speed. She dropped the magazine, ejected the chambered round, and slapped the bolt forward onto an empty chamber, rendering the rifle safe. She then placed the weapon and the ejected magazine neatly on the floor and flowed back into her non-threatening position, her hands visible, her eyes down. The entire sequence took 17 seconds. The room, which moments before had been a symphony of chaos, fell into a sudden, deafening silence. The only sound was the lingering hiss of the smoke canisters and the ragged breathing of terrified students. The exercise was over. The SEAL team leader, a broad-shouldered commander whose helmet bore the insignia of a Tier 1 unit, stood frozen, his own weapon held at a low ready. He stared not at the neutralized weapon on the floor, but at the girl. He had run this drill 100 times, seen 100 different outcomes, but he had never seen anything like this. This wasn't a lucky grab. It was a drill. A practiced, reflexive, brutally efficient weapon strip ingrained by thousands of hours of repetition. It was the muscle memory of a ghost. Mr. Davies, still trembling behind his lectern, finally found his voice. A ready, confused squawk. How did you do that? He stammered, looking at Anna as if she were an alien. The commander ignored him completely. He took 2 slow steps toward her, his eyes scanning her face, her stance, the unnatural calm she radiated. There was a flicker of something in his gaze, not just shock, but a dawning, impossible recognition. He raised a hand to his comms unit, his voice low but carrying in the stark silence. Watchdog, this is Eagle 1. Give me eyes on Petrova. Valkyrie file authorization Thorn. Omega 7 inches. The reply crackled over the open channel. A tiny disembodied voice that filled the lecture hall and turned every assumption to dust. Eagle 1 Watchdog. Standby. File confirmed. Subject is Petrova. Anya call sign Echo status active duty deep cover educational placement unit special warfare development group Valkyrie directive operator is considered a tier 1 asset. The voice paused and then continued, each word a hammer blow against the fragile arrogance of Mr. Davies. Qualifications include master level all small arms platforms, expert certification in 7 unarmed combat disciplines, graduated top of class from SEER School, Quantico advanced hostile environment training, and the A's defensive driving course. Her last assessment score in tactical threat analysis was the highest ever recorded at Dam Neck. The commander slowly lowered his hand. He looked at the girl in the grey hoodie, no longer seeing a student, but a peer, a weapon forged in the same fires as his own man, but tempered to a finer, sharper edge. He unbuckled his helmet, pulling it off and tucking it under his arm in a gesture of profound respect. My apologies for the intrusion, specialist, he said, his voice clear and formal. This classroom was not flagged as a friendly asset location. Well, clear out. He then turned his gaze, cold and hard as granite, on Mr. Davies. The proctor visibly flinched. Sir, the commander began, his voice dropping an octave, devoid of any warmth. For the last 2 hours, you've been in the presence of a national asset whose security clearance you couldn't get in 1,000 lifetimes. Her focus wasn't apathy. It was control. The kind of control that keeps people alive in places you only read about in your political science textbooks. You complained about the noise, but she was analyzing it. You saw a distracted student. I see a professional who just demonstrated more situational awareness than my entire assault team. You assumed weakness because you saw quiet. You should thank God she's on our side. He didn't wait for a response. With a sharp nod to Anya, a silent communication between 2 members of a very exclusive tribe, he turned and signaled for his men to withdraw. They complied instantly, melting back out of the shattered windows as quickly as they had appeared. Their mission forgotten, replaced by the stunning reality of what they had just witnessed. The story of the final exam takedown became a quiet legend, spreading first through the hushed whispers of the university, then through the encrypted channels and secure forums of the special operations community. It was told with a mixture of awe and disbelief. On campus, students would point out the lecture hall, the window frames still bearing the scars of the day. Anya Petrova became a mythic figure. People no longer saw a quiet student. They saw a ghost, a warrior hiding in plain sight. They gave her a wide berth, a zone of respect born from the knowledge that she inhabited a world they could not imagine. Mr. Davies was a changed man. The incident had shattered his comfortable academic certainty. A week later, he approached Anya after class. His usual bombers gone, replaced by a quiet, genuine humility. I am sorry, he said, his voice barely a whisper. For my arrogance, for my ignorance. Anya simply looked at him and nodded once. It was all the acknowledgement he needed. For her, the event wasn't a moment of vindication. It was simply an unexpected variable in a long and complicated equation. Her mission was to observe, to learn, and to be ready. That day, her training had simply taken over. The highest praise came not in words, but in a grainy video file that began circulating among the instructors at the Navy's most elite training centers. The security footage of Anya's 17-second weapon clear was now required viewing. A stark and perfect lesson in the economy of motion and the power of instinct. It was titled simply, The The Prova procedure. A year later, the university announced a new groundbreaking partnership with the Department of Defense. It was an initiative to provide seamless educational opportunities for active duty special operators, allowing them to pursue degrees while maintaining their operational readiness. Officially, it was called the Strategic Education Mandate. Unofficially, everyone on campus and in the Pentagon knew it as the Prova Initiative. The single undeniable display of her quiet competence had done more to bridge the gap between the academic and military worlds than a decade of policy proposals. The culture on campus shifted. Students looked at each other with a new sense of wonder, understanding that the person sitting next to them in calculus could be living an entirely different life, carrying burdens they could never comprehend. The story became a teaching tool, a piece of institutional folklore used to remind newcomers that assumptions are a dangerous luxury. Commander Thorne would tell it to every new class of SEAL candidates. A cautionary tale about the perils of underestimation. The most dangerous threat, he'd say, is the one you dismiss. Look for the quiet ones. Look for the ones who listen more than they speak. They are the ones who have mastered themselves, and they are the ones who will change the world. The legacy of that day wasn't written in textbooks or carved into a monument. It lived on in the silent mutual respect between two vastly different worlds. It lived on in the humbled professor who learned to see strength in stillness, and in the elite soldiers who were reminded that the ultimate warrior could be anyone anywhere. Anya Petrova finished her degree with honors. Her name on a diploma that would hang next to medals the world would never see. Her path was one of service, a life defined not by the noise of her accomplishments, but by the profound silence of her dedication. She taught a lesson that day that echoes still. That true worth is not announced with a trumpet, but demonstrated in the crucible of a crisis. It is a quiet language spoken not with words, but with action, with precision, and with a calm competence that needs no applause. It is the creed of the quiet professional, a legacy written not in ink, but in the deafening silence of a job well done. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud assumption and where silent discipline defines their worth, subscribe to The Final Watch.